Namaste and welcome to Urban Chatterati. This is Abhinav Prakash, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Anish Gokhale, who is a historian and an author, and who writes extensively on the Maratha Empire and the battles of the Maratha Empire. So, Anish, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Anish, when we look at the current situation in Afghanistan, we have seen the return of the Taliban. We are seeing that India's space in that region has been shrinking because of the games played by Pakistan and, of course, an hostile Taliban regime. But if you go back in the history, Indian empires or Indian rulers were very much part of what was happening in the Afghanistan or in that region. Last time, an Indian empire played a very important role in the northwestern frontier of India was the Maratha Empire. When you have the Marathas who ruled up until or whose armies reached up until the borders of the Afghanistan, and we still have that historical memory of famous Lahore Darbar by the Marathas in 1758, if I'm not wrong, where after several centuries, a Hindu power, an Indian native power, conducted, its or exercised its sovereignty over the Lahore. So, how do you see the entire episode of the Maratha conquest of the Punjab? Or I would say liberation of the Punjab from the foreign Turkic rule.
Right. So the Maratha conquest of the Punjab, as you mentioned, happened in 1758, and it existed for about 8 or 10 months that they held some sort of political power in that sector. But to understand how they reached there, obviously, we need to move back in time and start right from the death of Aurangzeb, which itself happened at the end of a 25-26 year war against the Marathas themselves in the Deccan, which drained out all the resources of the Mughal Empire into fighting this war. And it was left a shell of the former self, where they could easily move around thousands and thousands of men, armies, money that went away from the Mughals. And now it was the Marathas who were on the ascendant. Next 20 years, of course, was spent by Peshwa Bajirao in consolidating this Maratha hold. He took the Marathas from the Narmada. Narmada is more or less the boundary of Maharashtra, as you know. And he took it from the Narmada right up to the Chambal and even beyond, in fact, touching Yamuna. There is a letter by him where it's mentioned that our realm has touched Yamuna. This is 1740. When he died, already Marathas were influencing Bundelkhand, influencing Delhi, influencing Malwa, Gujarat, and they had acquired a central power status sort of in India. The next 10 years were a continuation of this policy, where more territories were annexed by the Marathas. And by the time you come to around the year, say 1754-55, you will find the Maratha Empire has consolidated itself over a region that stretches just about north of Delhi to south of Maharashtra and from Gujarat all the way to Cuttack in Orissa. So this is the influence that they held in the 1750s. At the same time, we find that the Afghans have started coalescing under Ahmad Shah Abdali. So even today, Afghanistan calls Ahmad Shah Abdali father of the nation. He is their Rashtrapita. And why is it so? When we can obviously say that, this is Afghanistan's condition, so obviously if you're going to have Ahmad Shah Abdali as your father of the nation, then it is obviously going to end up with a country like this. But from their point of view, if you see, Abdali managed to do something that a lot of Afghan leaders had failed to do over the past 100-200 years. He was somebody who had managed to bring all these tribes together. Now, as you know, these Afghan tribes are very difficult to control, which America found out for 20 years. They are very vociferous. They have enmities that go back 3, 4, 5 generations, and they keep going at it. This kind of a disparate kingdom or kingdoms, this Ahmad Shah Abdali managed to bring together and create a semblance of a state, which is what he did. Is important from the Afghanistan point of view. Obviously, like all other from Afghanistan, he also crossed the Khyber Pass, came into India, and invaded the Mughal Empire, whatever are left of it, of Delhi, of Punjab. And especially if you see the raid of 1757. In 1757, Abdali mounted his fourth invasion of India, and he reached up to Delhi. He reached up to Mathura. Mathura, he killed a lot of people. He broke temples. Then he put his own person, Najibud-Dawla, at the Red Fort in Delhi, and he returned back to Kandahar by putting his puppet over there. So obviously now this became a new challenge in Indian politics that the Afghan ruler has decided to again sort of start dictating politics of India by doing all these gimmicks in Delhi. This was the main background behind the Maratha foray into Punjab, which starts from around this date itself in 1757, where they obtained sanads from the Mughal emperor saying that Punjab and Sindh belong to the Marathas for the collection of taxes. And as a result, they start in 1757, first evict Najibud-Dawla from Delhi and then move westwards. Now, this is the very rare occasion where an Indian army, a native Indian force, has managed to go in the westward direction from Delhi. This point, obviously, there are the Sikhs and Adina Beg in Punjab. Punjab is, of course, being ruled by the Afghans. And when Taimur, Jahan Khan and Taimur Shah are the two people left at Lahore and other places by Abdali as he is going back from the Punjab. And Adina Beg is the former Mughal governor of that place. He basically invites the Marathas in, the Sikhs also. This is a good opportunity as far as the Marathas are concerned to stretch their domains up to the river Indus, because this is something they are wanting to do from a very long time, is that they know that the river Indus is very important culturally, from religion point of view also, which is why it has to be reached and brought under their control or domains. This is where you have the start of your campaign in the beginning of 1758. There are Sikh leaders also who are part of this campaign. And Ahmad Shah Abdali, let's not forget, has also done the act of destroying the Akal Takht when he is going back from Mathura. He stops at Amritsar and destroys the Akal Takht and slaughters cows in its vicinity and fills up the what we call today the Amrit Sarovar or the Sarovar of the Golden Temple that has been filled up with cow carcasses and mud and soil. After that, Akal Takht have been destroyed. What you see today, the Golden Temple is of a later construction. Construction in the sense, the gold plating has come from the time of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. But 100 years prior to that, in the day of Ahmad Shah Abdali, it has been destroyed. So one achievement of this campaign into the Punjab by the Marathas and the Sikhs is that they managed to rebuild this Akal Takht which had been destroyed and clean that Sarovar. In fact, there is one source saying that the Afghan soldiers were captured and put to work in cleaning this Sarovar. So this is how you have at the beginning of 1758. April, we managed to reach Lahore, and which is where you have your Lahore Darbar. In fact, Jahan Khan and Timur Shah managed to escape across the Chenab River. So you have Amritsar, after that I believe it's the Bias River, and then you have Lahore. About 100 miles off Lahore, you have the Chenab River. The Afghan forces managed to escape across Chenab. And this is the point from where all your various letters of the Marathas being in Punjab start disseminating towards all parts of India. Where one of the letters clearly mentions that it has not happened in living memory that Indian army has reached west of Delhi and here we are in Lahore. So they chase up to Chenab to find the Chenab is flooded at that time or whatever reason is there. They cannot cross it. They retreat back to Lahore because Lahore is the main city. There is nothing much of note beyond Lahore to build a base. This is where Lahore Darbar happens in April 1758. There is a mention that Baisakhi was celebrated together with the Sikhs in Lahore. Beyond this, towards the end of the year, once the rains have subsided, then further some Maratha armies also make it to Attock, and there is mention of them also being present in Peshawar for a limited amount of time. So this is the basic history behind it as to
Yeah.
how they reached Punjab.
Yeah, but you also talked about the celebration of Baisakhi, and by that time, the Sikhs were already a factor in the region, in the Punjab politics. So, how were the Sikh and the Maratha relation? Were they cooperating with each other? Was there some kind of competition, or even was there was some clash, or it was just the local regional politics which was multi-dimensional?
Right. So a few things. One is that the Maratha foray into Punjab, it was symbolically very important for India's history because it marked the first time in about 700, 800 years that native power had managed to stretch itself all the way to the Indus. And between the conquest of the western parts of Punjab by Muhammad Ghaznavi from the Shahi kings, so Trilochan Pal Singh, Anand Pal Singh, uh, from that point of time to the present day, the only two powers, Indian powers, who managed to have a hold on western Punjab are the Marathas and the Sikh Empire, obviously, which was a great thing in itself under Maharaja Ranjit Singh. But if you leave out this campaign of 1758-59 and the 40 odd years under Maharaja Ranjit Singh, you will find that the western part of Punjab, that is west of the river, uh, Chenab or Satluj, it has always been under a foreign power, either under the Turkish rulers or under the Mughals or under the British Empire, and finally now also it is under the state of Pakistan. In light of this history, it becomes important to celebrate that particular stretch of history in 1758, and of course the Sikh Empire also that followed about half a century later. But from a strategic point of view, the Maratha Empire was stretching itself too much by going into the Punjab. To be able to properly mount an invasion into Punjab and hold that region, which was very vast, had five rivers feeding into it, it needed a very strong base in Bundelkhand or at Delhi, or preferably somewhere north of Delhi, where they could draw supply lines from. But unfortunately, the Maratha supply lines were stretched all the way back almost up to the Maharashtra border. Roads were not very good in those days. In fact, what we today have your Gujarat, Rajasthan, Delhi route of today, what is today, I don't know, it was formerly National Highway 8 or something, but this very frequent route of today did not exist in those times. Uh, did not exist at least as a all-weather route or a very frequented route. We had the routes going through most of central India. They were not all-weather routes. This was a problem. So strategically speaking, they were stretching themselves too much without considering the uh, problem of not having a proper base in Delhi or in Bundelkhand. The Sikhs themselves were not very powerful at that point of time. Their power starts ascending after the Battle of Panipat. Once the Afghans have been severely dented in that battle, is when the Sikhs start rising from around 1765, 1770. When you talk about 1758, just 4 years prior to this, in 1754, we find that the Mughal Faujdar of Punjab, a person named Mir Mannu, the Mir Mannu had brought out a farman saying that for every head of a Sikh person brought to him, he was going to give 10 rupees reward. And many Sikhs got killed as a result, and their heads were paraded in front of Mir Mannu at Lahore. And all those people got 10 rupees. 10 rupees was substantial money. It was, a common person like a soldier used to get 5 rupees monthly salary. And so 10 rupees also good monthly salary in those times. So obviously it was for earning some quick buck also, or for religious fanaticism also this happened. So the Sikhs militarily were still a growing force in this point of time, which is why Adina Beg did not believe that it was sufficient to take the Sikhs along. At the same time, the Sikhs who had been in the Punjab for a very long time, and in fact, they had faced innumerable atrocities from right from the days of Aurangzeb, if not before that. So now, when they were seeing a glimmer of hope, obviously the feeling on their side was that Punjab belongs to us. There was some friction. First thing, there was understanding also, and part of this campaign where they cooperated, we find all the way till Lahore, it is a combined Sikh Maratha army which has managed to conquer all these places and drive out the Afghans. But beyond this, they could not agree to the terms of Chauthai. So Marathas collected tax, it is one fourth of the produce, known as Chauth. And the Sikhs had a tax called the Rakhi. The Rakhi tax was one fifth of the total income. Chauthai was one fourth. So in terms of obviously financial matters, it was paying less in terms of Rakhi. And the Marathas believe that they had the rights to Chauthai in the Punjab, and they had a point of friction with the Sikhs in this regard as to whether the Rakhi should be collected by the Sikhs and kept, or the Marathas should be collecting Chauthai. So this was the tax collection friction point. As it so happened, the Maratha garrisons were not sufficient to defend Punjab when Abdali again came on his return trip. Very feebly guarded, Maratha garrisons evacuated very quickly in 1759, 1760, and of course, then we had the Battle of Panipat.
Yep, I mean, and the Battle of Panipat, as you said, was the defining moment because it changed the power equation. Even though the Marathas did lose the battle, the Afghan power was also broken. So we do not see the Afghans asserting themselves in the northern Indian politics after the Battle of Panipat. But the real beneficiaries of the Battle of Panipat were the British, it seems. So after that, British also started becoming a factor in the politics of Punjab. So how was this interplay between Marathas, the Afghans, the British, and the Sikhs in the period after the Battle of Panipat? And why did, let's say, Marathas had to lose out to the British for the control over Delhi and the Punjab?
Right. So, as you mentioned, that the Battle of Panipat basically was a big dent for Maratha fortunes as well as for the Afghans, because in fact, if you see Abdali's approach, he knew that putting his forces into a huge battle like Panipat is going to dent him severely. And his wish was to actually only hold Punjab so that he has a province which can feed his population in Afghanistan where nothing grows. So, to hold Afghanistan properly and provide a sufficient supply of food and water is why he wanted to hold the Punjab up to the river Satluj, because his term was that he had reached up to Sirhind on his first invasion. So he agreed to put the boundary at Satluj. But the Maratha counter to this was that the minimum boundary we want is the Indus River, because the Sindhu River or the river Indus is very important for us in cultural terms, boundary terms. All the descriptions of India that you find in all the ancient texts will mention the river Sindhu, that our boundary starts there, either at Himalayas or at the Sindhu. In fact, there were somebody like Raghunath Rao who also insisted on saying that Kabul Kandahar also belonged to us. So there is no question of Afghans holding anything at all. If not that, then at least the Indus. And this is where the friction point continued to exist as to should they cede territory all the way to Satluj or insist on the Indus as the boundary. We could not go through these negotiations, and finally we had the Battle of Panipat, which ended up in a Pyrrhic victory for the Afghans. Now the Marathas managed to hold their own for the next 40 odd years, even after the Battle of Panipat had finished. About the British, yes, they won in 1757 Plassey. Then they got the Nawab of Awadh under their control. They won Buxar. From around 1780s is where we see the Marathas, Sikhs, and the British together come into the picture in this region of Haryana, Punjab. Maharji Shinde, in fact, tried to build an alliance with the Sikhs. Now let's remember that till the advent of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the Sikh missiles were also very divided lot. There was constant infighting among them. There was no surety as to who's the leader, and the kind of unity of force that Maharaja Ranjit Singh brought in the early parts of the 19th century, this was missing because let's remember that the Sikhs were still a recovering force from all those debacles of the past. So there was a lot of friction between the Marathas and the Sikhs. You could have Maharaja Shinde sign a peace treaty with one missile or two missiles, and then you would have a problem dealing with the other two, three missiles because of rivalry and fighting between them. This is the kind of situation, and of course, Maharaja Shinde's own territory was not entirely well settled because there were 100 different powers attacking Delhi. It was not so easy to hold Delhi, not so easy to hold Agra, because the Marathas are still in this recovering phase. This is where the British come into the picture, where the British were very sure that they don't want this Sikh and Maratha alliance to go forward. A strong Maratha-Sikh alliance meant that the British could not really interfere in North India's affairs. And this is why the British sometimes try to help the Sikhs, sometimes stayed aloof. So we have a very confusing triangle of events that takes place in Punjab, Haryana in the 1780s and 90s. What the British excelled at, and there is something really worth appreciating in all the statecraft, is that they knew exactly at what point to pick a quarrel with which party. Throughout their rule, if you find from 1757 right up to 1803, 1804, in fact 1849, we will see that they know where to start battling and where not to give battle. So when they know that Maharaji Shinde in the north and Rana Fadnavis in the south are still living and existing, they did not try to poke around much with Maratha politics. The minute these two persons passed away, they waded full force into Maratha politics, declared war against Shinde and Holkar and the entire confederacy, and ended up winning that war. But they did not force their hand. Once they had lost at the Battle of Vadgaon in Maharashtra, next 20 years they did not bother poking around in politics of the Marathas. Of course, some play was there, but not to the extent that they declared war against them. Same case with the Sikhs. They possibly saw the power of Maharaja Ranjit Singh for whatever means. The Treaty of Satluj restricted Maharaja Ranjit Singh to one side, the British to the other side, and they did not bother crossing into each other's territories. Especially the British did not bother crossing into Punjab till that person lived, that is Maharaja Ranjit Singh. But once Ranjit Singh had died, it was only 10 years after him that the whole of Punjab got annexed by the British Empire. So this is the kind of interesting politics play we had. Marathas tried to win over the Sikhs. Not entirely possible because of the troubled times. Marathas themselves were not 100% in control of the region, that is west of Delhi, although they did hold Haryana. In fact, Haryana went to the British from the Marathas. As for the Treaty of Surji Anjangaon, which happened in 1803, Haryana went as part of Sindh's or Scindia's territories to the British Empire. And the Sikhs obviously had this on-off relationship. There were a couple of instances where Sikh presence did help the Marathas. For example, there was a invasion launched by Taimur Shah, the ruler of Afghanistan, when he tried to mount an invasion into India, but he was stopped near Peshawar itself by various bands of Sikh warriors. So that is one example. The reasons for the Maratha loss to the British were various, but mainly they lost at the Battle of Laswari in the north, that is near Alwar, and to the south at a place called Asai near Aurangabad. These two battles essentially decided the control of India between the British and the Marathas.
That's very true. It's a very interesting time period, and unfortunately, it is not debated or discussed much in the historical memory, a popular historical discourse in India. But I think the 18th century, 19th century were a very interesting time, and we need to pay more attention to it because that laid the foundation of the modern India that we have as of today. But thanks a lot, Anish. It's a very interesting topic, very interesting time period to talk about. The time is always short, and I have to save some content for the future discussion as well. But thanks a lot for your time, Anish, and hoping to see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And thank you, audience, for listening to us. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and see you soon with Anish some other time, maybe talking about the Punjab and Marathas, or maybe some other part of the Maratha Empire. Thank you once again.